somebody who has quite the reputation, and I mean this sincerely, someone I have always, from a distance, had a great deal of respect for. We have a mutual friendship, and he thinks very highly of you, is Marguerite Willis. She is the wife of former mayor of Florence, Frank Willis, an accomplished attorney, a very interesting person, and someone who was chosen to run for governor of South Carolina in the Democrat Party. Welcome to you, ma'am, and good morning.
Good morning, Ken. I'm so glad to be with you here in our hometown, Florence, Timmonsville. We're actually in Timmonsville this morning.
Okay.
So, good morning. And you know, my great-grandfather's from Timmonsville.
Okay.
Shortest-serving governor in the history of South Carolina.
Wow.
I bet you don't know this.
I didn't know that.
Okay, 5 days. Charles A. Smith from Timmonsville was lieutenant governor. And back when people ran for governor and lieutenant, well, actually everybody ran for governor. And then the number one vote getter was governor. And the second one was lieutenant governor. He lost a guy named Cole Blease. You probably heard of him.
I have.
Kind of a racist and a horrible guy. Supposedly my great-grandfather was the finest of the fine. You know, of course, that's what the family says. Anyway, Blease made a sports bet that I guess that somebody or just a bet that someone would not follow him in office. I believe it was Mr. Manning. Sure enough, Manning got elected in November. So Blease sits around and says, $10,000. I'll just quit my office 5 days early. So Smith succeeded him in office. My great-grandfather, because Cole Blease lost a bet or didn't want to lose a bet, became governor. 5 days. I'm hoping to beat the family record.
There you go. Longer than 5 days.
That's right.
I want to get to why you want to be governor. I mean, obviously you love South Carolina. You've been here your entire life. You're dedicated to South Carolina. What are our priorities? What should our priorities be? What should the next governor look to in relation to what makes us a better state?
That's a great question. I get that question a lot. And I think the reason I want to do it is I've spent my whole life being a problem solver, big business problems. That's been my career. Hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars in disputing cases. I know how to solve a complicated problem. And I have to do it on a schedule. You know, if you're in court, the judge doesn't say, it'll take 20 years or wait till the next legislative session. We'll pick it up again. They say, get it done or get out of here. And so if I don't get a problem resolved in a timely way, my clients suffer. So I've been real good about that. I know how to do it on a schedule. And it just seems to me we have big problems that the governor can work on. And this matters because the governor has limited powers in this state. You know that as well as anybody. But the three big areas that I see where I want to work are the following. Economic development, particularly in rural areas. I want to tackle poverty. It's a huge issue. It's a complicated issue, but that's my specialty. I want to tackle health care and particularly looking into the future. We know we've got a graying population. We know we've got the prospect that the federal government may cut what they call entitlements, which is Medicaid, food supplements, things that we really depend on in this poor state. And also I want to talk about prison reform. So the governor actually controls the Department of Commerce, controls DHEC and DSS, and controls the prisons. Now, one thing that I call my adversaries on, or my opponents, depending on how you call Mr. Smith and Mr. Noble, my two running, the folks I'm running against in the Democratic primary, they want to talk about education all the time. Smith wants to be the education governor. Noble wants to reform the education system in ways that I think just are unspeakable, but still he's got a plan. And I call him out and I say, listen, education is not the governor's job in this state. It still constitutionally belongs to the legislature because I'm a girl, right? So I went and read the Constitution. I wanted to know what the job was because, girls always want to do their homework and get it right and want to be informed. So it's not the governor's job. It doesn't mean we don't care about it. It doesn't mean I don't have ideas about it. But I want to bloom where I'm planted. And I'll just add this. I am a senior, as I like to say, a proud senior these days. And I just think this is my last mile. And I say to people, I know that you're a Christian. I'm a Christian. And I say there's a day that's going to come. I'm going to stand in front of my maker. And he's going to say, what'd you do? What'd you do with your life? And I'm going to say, I hope, you led me a path where I became a solver of complicated problems. And at the end, I stood before the state and the people I loved, and I said, if you'll have me, I will try. I will be here to serve you if that's what you choose to do. But I'll tell the Lord when I meet him, I'll say, I gave it my best shot, and I came forward to try.
That's interesting. I do want to mention, Alex, doing a Facebook Live segment. You can watch us by going to the Facebook page at Live953. I've been wrong a lot in my political prognosis. I've been right a couple of times. One thing, Marguerite, that I saw coming, and it wasn't necessarily Donald Trump, but I saw an outsider. I saw the ability for someone's message to resonate with a certain percentage of our voting electorate that were not ideologically driven. It was not about bigger government or smaller government or lower taxes or more taxes or a reform of education or no reform of education. It was the fact that a certain percentage of our population believed the federal government did not represent them, the disenfranchised, the people that don't have lobbyists and consultants and people representing their interest. I was right about that. And some way, somehow, Trump tapped into that. Bernie Sanders, to some degree, on the other side, tapped into that. What do you make of that energy and emotion in the political orbit today?
I think people do feel disenfranchised. I think they feel forgotten, Ken. And I think that feeling of sadness, of depression, of angst is what people have tapped into. It's energizing folks. I tell people all the time, we need to treat government like a business. Right? It's a big business. It's a lot of money, and we pay taxes. So you're actually paying the salaries of these folks. And if you don't like what they're doing, vote them out of office. And I tell people that because it makes them feel like they have some power. Because people who feel like they don't have any power are basically depressed, and they lack energy, and they're not involved politically. You got to empower the folks to realize that they actually are paying for government. And, you know, what's going on in Columbia, I have to say, I just got tired of it. I'm tired of our legislature. They just don't get anything of importance done, period.
Marguerite, when we look at the office of governor of South Carolina, you're right. We're a legislatively dominated state. There's reasons to believe why that happened many, many years ago. I won't go into great detail, but we should be embarrassed by the lack of authority our governor has.
Yes.
How would you work with the legislative body? It's majority Republican. You would be a Democrat governor. How would you work with those people that will be necessary in your world if you're to advance an agenda?
Well, one of the things that's different this year, Ken, and you know this, this is the first time in the history of the state the governor and the lieutenant governor are going to run on one ticket. I've already picked a running mate. I picked Senator John Scott of Richland. He's an experienced legislator. He's respected in the Senate. He was in the House before that. He knows how that body operates. And so I'll have John with me to help me with the legislative agenda. But I think that at the end of the day, I'm just an honest person. I'm going to tell you something, and I'm going to live up to my word. And if I change my mind, I'll tell you that, too. And I think that goes a long way in life, just being honest about things.
We live in a small state. We live in I would argue, a donor state. There's this belief amongst South Carolinians that, you know, and I call it the states' rights crowd. Being a Republican, you interact with those people a lot. How important is the relationship with the federal government? I mean, obviously, we have a central planner, have a big federal government. We hear complaints on this radio show every morning because the majority of our listeners are for a smaller government. But as governor of South Carolina, you'll deal with the federal government on Medicaid and some other major issues. Explain to me how you, as governor of South Carolina, would deal and negotiate with the federal government.
Well, first, let me say I'm a believer in local government. My husband, Frank, as you indicated, was mayor for a long time. And while I have no political experience, have never run for office before, I know how it is to answer the phone in the middle of the night with somebody's sewers backed up. Everything about politics to me starts locally. And that's the best government, is local government. I think that the state ought to take care of what it can take care of and leave the rest alone. So I am not a huge, big government person, which makes me sort of a contrarian in the big Democratic Party sense. As far as dealing with the federal government, I'm going to take all the money they'll give us. They give us money, we're taking it. I'm not going to stand on principle about that. We made a big mistake. Haley made a big mistake when she didn't take the Medicaid money. That was $11 billion over a 7-year period, and it would have helped 200,000 South Carolinians, not the children who are poor, not the seniors who are poor, but 200,000 folks who live at or near poverty. And it would have helped those folks, and it might have kept some of our rural hospitals from closing. And you know, Ken, we know, I mean, if somebody was listening to this from, say, New York, they'd have no idea about rural poverty. But we know what it is, and we live next to it. It's one of the things that's causing me to step forward. So the federal government's handing me back my tax dollars. I'm taking it. As far as dealing with them, I don't like the fact that so much of the money we get has so much red tape. Our teachers, you talk to teachers these days, underpaid, overworked, and they talk about the paperwork. So much of that paperwork is because we're getting money from the federal government. Now, we're addicted to that money. a third of our state government budget comes from the federal government. So we need the money. But I don't really know how other than as far as trying to talk to someone about reduction of paperwork, we deal with that.
You mentioned the Department of Commerce earlier. South Carolina has figured out a way to land BMW and Boeing and Volvo and some of these other major corporations, but it does appear to be urban-centric.
Yes.
I remember running for office, Marguerite, and I would travel down 85 or 26 or 20, and there's no question South Carolina had a lot of prosperity and a lot of innovation and creativity had migrated to this state. But you'd get 20 miles off the beaten path, and because of the decline of agrarian economies in these certain places, is there a specific plan to bring economic development to rural South Carolina? Because I'm a big believer. I'm from Pamplico, town with no stoplight, and I'm a big believer that a chain is no stronger than its weakest link, and rural South Carolina is in dire straits.
I'd like to say amen to that. And yes, I do have a plan. Here's my plan. As I said, I believe in blooming where I'm planted. I run the Department of Commerce as governor. I'm going to take those smart people, and there are a lot of smart people, and say, look, we're going to focus for a while here on rural South Carolina. We're going to take our best brains, and we're going to put everybody in a room, metaphorically, and say, let's focus on this. Now, a place like, I talk about Marion County all the time, and I think they're probably tired of me saying how poor they are, but they're poor.
Correct.
We know they're poor, and they're our neighbor here, and I believe we need to love our neighbor. So I'm talking about Marion County this morning. Okay, what are we going to do for Marion County? They don't have a harbor like Charleston. They don't really have a good interstate. They're geographically disadvantaged. All right, what are we going to do for them? Here's what I say. We're going to be innovative about it. And if they want a casino, I'm all in. I'm not going to make a moral judgment about this as long as we can regulate it and tax it. If it helps the folks in Marion County, I'm not saying they want a casino. This is
Sure.
just an example. I say we do that because we can't stand on some kind of moral principle here with regard to how we lift people out of poverty. There was a decision just yesterday. I haven't studied it yet out of the Supreme Court with regard to gaming, particularly sports gaming, which is going to open up, I think, a lot of avenues across the nation for some additional options for gaming. Again, I'm all in on that if we regulate it and tax it, because those are additional dollars that can come into this state. They're going to other states anyway to help us work on our rural areas particularly.
At some point in time in your political life, whether you choose to run for office or not, help candidates, advise candidates, serve on committees and boards, I think you've got to hash out internally and introspectively what is the fundamental role of government. I mean, I think that's a legitimate, fair debate to be had. Bernie Sanders has one belief that I'm not in tune with, but I respect people that disagree with me. If someone asked Marguerite Willis, what is your belief in the fundamental role of government, you would answer how?
I would say the fundamental role of government is like the innkeeper in the story of the Good Samaritan. It's a place that people who are beaten and battered along the road check in for a little while, and you help them out, and you get them back to an independent state, and you send them back on the road. I think it exists for that purpose. Again, metaphorically, the notion of government is not to take everybody in forever and pay for everything that they need. But they're people, they're old folks, they're kids, some folks who need a helping hand. I think the government exists to help the people on the fringes here. And for everybody else, I say, get back out there and be independent. I believe, so simply stated, I believe the government's role here, in particular when we're talking about the state, is to help everybody be as independent as they can in their life.
There's a sentiment amongst the voter. They're looking for an outsider. You are a political outsider. You never seek public office. You've never held public office. This is an interesting question. It's kind of a weird question. I thought about it last night, but I'd love to hear your response. As somebody who is an outsider, what is the advantage of voting for an outsider, and what do you have to be careful about if you're elected as an outsider? I think
the advantage of voting for an outsider, let's call it somebody who's not a practiced politician, all right? Because I've been around politics, sure. I've been around big business because as you know, I'm a pretty successful lawyer, and I've been on the state chamber of commerce. So I'm not like a person who just walked in off the street and said, "Hey, I think I'll be governor today." But I think the advantage is that I am, number one, I'm not beholden to anybody, and number two, I'm not encumbered by it's always been done that way. So I bring a certain innovative and a fresh perspective to it, because we've got some big problems. You need somebody who's got a fresh perspective, because I'm assuming that people have tried a lot of ways to solve the poverty problem in this state. It just hasn't worked yet.